When I was in seminary, I served at St. Luke in the Fields. It's a beautiful parish that sits in the heart of Greenwich Village. Its aisles are wide and they're covered in these large black and white tiles. The windows do not have any, much like here, they are open to the outside and out into a garden and the trees. It's a beautiful space. And Holy Week was a really, really big deal at St. Luke in the Fields. We would have mandatory rehearsals leading up to it, and if you didn't go to rehearsals, you weren't participating. Detailed instructions were handed out weeks in advance and were expected to be committed to memory. As a seminarian, it was both intense and I also learned a great deal. But when the 3 days of the Triduum rolled around, we were ready. At Maundy Thursday, as the service drew to an end and we began to strip the altar, everything again was very well choreographed. Solemnly and efficiently, the altar was cleared, and then something happened that I'd never seen before. The rector reached below the altar and pulled out this large bucket of water. He poured water across the altar and took a branch and began to scrub it. He removed his stole, and I can promise you that now, almost 25 years later, I can clearly remember not only the sight, but there was also a smell. It was almost as if the incense was sort of permeating up from the wood. So I tell you the story on Good Friday because it makes me think about the person who was left behind. The person who was left behind from the gathering with Jesus and his disciples, who cleaned up the space after him to make it ready for the next guests. The person who, after Judas had slipped out the door to betray Jesus, after the heartbroken disciples had left to go to the garden to pray, who was there? Who also pulled out a bucket of water and scrubbed the table? Maybe it was a disciple who needed something to do to shake off this incredible and overwhelming sense of dread. Or maybe it was someone at the house who stood back in the shadows, who witnessed that incredible scene, who heard these words about body and blood spoken by Jesus. Maybe she felt the urge to scrub even harder, to wipe away the pain. In addition, on this day, as they watched Jesus die, who thought someone must prepare the tomb? Who carried a bucket and a cloth to the new tomb of Arimathea? Who cleared out the cobwebs and the dust? Who made sure that the floors were swept once the mourners returned home? Who kept watch? I would like to believe that maybe I'm self-aware or observant or maybe even faithful enough to realize those times when I know when to just stop. To know the times when the Holy Spirit comes to me in those quiet, alone moments. But if I'm really honest, a far different reality is many times more true than not. It makes me think of the story of Jacob and Esau. Now, Jacob wasn't exactly the most upstanding biblical character. Blind and sick, his father falls victim to his son's ploy and gives Jacob his inheritance. And Esau is furious, understandably. Fearing for his life, Jacob sends his family out ahead of him and seeks out a place to spend the night. This is not a pilgrimage. This is an evacuation. He is scared and alone. He is the one left behind. I can only imagine that his last thought before succumbing to sleep had nothing to do with experiencing the holiness of God. Probably God was the furthest things from his thoughts. He probably thought that he saw his last sunrise and resigned himself to the consequences of his decisions and his actions. Yet as we know, he had this magnificent dream of angels and ladders, this image that's so familiar to us. But today, on this Good Friday, I want us to pay attention to God's words. He tells Jacob that he will be the father of a great generation, but he says to him, "Know that I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, for I will not leave you." I will not leave you. In other words, don't you understand? I am already here. So he wakes up and he says, surely God was in this place. Jacob wakes up to God, not vice versa. So there along a riverbank, in the most unholy of situations, in the most unlikely of places, in the midst of the messiness of life, Jacob names the place Bethel, the house of the Lord. This reminds us that God can happen anywhere. In the middle of a desert, by the side of a stream, in our living rooms, at our dinner tables, here at St. Mark's, in grand cathedrals, in upper rooms, and even at the foot of the cross, most especially at the foot of the cross. The rest have scattered. There's just a few left. How do we even begin to grasp the story of a God who comes to die in order for us to live? But we know that God is here. So on this Good Friday, I invite each one of us to resist the urge to flee, to move, to not just stay and remain in this space, to stay behind. Not too quick to move on to the next step, the next day, the next moment. Let us in our minds get down on the floor with mop and sponge amid the messiness of our lives, as well as the pain and sin that separate us from God, and scrub like crazy. Make our hearts ready. Clear out the clutter. Just be here. Be ready. And in the midst of this, don't lose heart, because we are not lost, because we have already been found. Be here in this place. Prepare what's next. Prepare for the joy and the wonder. Anticipate the celebration and the magnificence of the empty tomb. Claim our resurrected lives and our resurrected